Their leader, Semjaza, voiced his concern. "I fear you will not indeed agree to do this deed, and I alone shall have to pay the penalty of a great sin." But the angels, resolute in their decision, answered him, "Let us all swear an oath and bind ourselves by mutual imprecations, not to abandon this plan, but to do this thing." So they all swore together and bound themselves by mutual imprecations upon it. In total, there were 200 angels who descended in the days of Jared, alighting upon the summit of Mount Hermon. They called it Mount Hermon because they had sworn and bound themselves by mutual imprecations upon it. Among these fallen angels, the leaders included Samwazaz, Arakuba, Ramiel, Kokablo, Tamlo, Remlo, Dano, Ezekiel, Barakijal, Asael, Armaros, Badarel, Anano, Zaklel, Samsapil, Sadarel, Turel, Jomjal, and Sariel, each commanding a division of 10. These fallen angels took wives for themselves, each choosing one, and began to defile themselves.
Who descended upon the peak of Mount Hermon and made a covenant to essentially create their own offspring, their own creation, their own beings through mating with the daughters of men. So here we are at the location of the rebellion of the fallen angels. And then when we look at the structure behind me, we see
Genesis chapter 6, verses 1 through 4. And it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives, all which they chose. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not always thrive with men, for that he also is flesh, yet his days shall be 120. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them. The same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown.
And the whole earth was of one language and of one speech. And it came to pass, as they journeyed from the east, that they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. And they said one to another, Go to, let us make brick, and burn them throughly. And they had brick for stone, and slime had they for mortar. And they said, Go to, let us build us a city and a tower, whose top may reach unto heaven, and let us make us a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth. And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children of men builded. And the Lord said, Behold, the people is one, and they have all one language, and this they begin to do. And now nothing will be restrained from them which they have imagined to do. Go to, let us go down, and there confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. So the Lord scattered them abroad from thence upon the face of all the earth, and they left off to build the city. Therefore is the name of it called Babel, because the Lord did there confound the language of all the earth. And from thence did the Lord scatter them abroad upon the face of all the earth.
We are at Nimrod's castle, way up in the air right now. Way up in the air. We scan across this thing.
Well, pay very close attention. Chapter 12, verse 1. Now, these are the kings of the land which the children of Israel smote. A lot of this is redundant, that's okay. And possessed their land on the other side of Jordan toward the rising of the sun. Well, which way is it toward the rising of the sun? That would be the east. From the river Arnon unto Mount Hermon, and all the plain on the east. And of course, this would be given to Reuben, as I will show you in the next lecture, and to the half tribe of Manasseh. Verse 2, Sihon, king of the Amorites, who dwelt in Heshbon, and ruled from Aorah, which is upon the bank of the river Arnon, and from the middle of the river, and from half Gilead even unto the river Jabbok, which is the border of the children of Ammon. And dividing it up. Again, I will be showing you a picture map so that you can just understand this better in the next lecture. Verse 3, and from the plain to the sea of Chinneroth, which is Gennesaret, which Jesus would spend so much time with and at, on the east, and into the sea of the plain, even to the salt sea, that would be the Dead Sea, okay? On the east, the way to Beth Jeshimoth, that is to say the house of the desert, and from the south under Ashdod-Pishketh. And so it is that time marches on and God makes arrangements. Verse 4, and the coast of Og, there's that old giant again. The coast of Og, king of Bashan, which was of the remnant of the giants, still there, that dwelt at Ashtaroth and at Edrei, which means stronghold. He had a stronghold. Everything, Bashan had a reputation of, even the wild ox were huge there. Everything was huge, and here in part you can understand why. It's where old Og in that second influx took over and where he was, the giants of that time. And here, if you're a realist, you can understand why God intended that this be cleansed, whereby a people could be set in motion that loved him, mostly that obeyed him, and followed him and brought in salvation even to those that were enemies of Almighty God, to bring them into light ultimately. We are not judges, but our Father is, and our Father knows how he judges. And so it is that he brings things to pass. And to some it would be a mystery, but when you understand what breaking God's commandment, that breaks the opportunity for innocency, such as the Nephilim coming down and producing Og, which puts in mind they're not innocent anymore. They know what that sin was. They know what happened there. They are unclean. And it breaks God's plan of innocency and true love for his children, and it must be fixed. There must and will be a change. Verse 5, and reigned in Mount Hermon, and in Shalkat, and in all Bashan, all the land of Og there, under the border of Geshurites, and the Maacathites, and half Gilead, the brother of Sihon, king of Heshbon. And here, unfortunately, from Gilead, we have part of these people from Gibeon as well. Still got them with us. Why? Because Joshua messed up. And so you always have that to deal with. Is it good? It's good for us to have the knowledge to understand that you have to pay attention to what Almighty God teaches and the way he leads us and instructs us. Again, you may think these things are not important. Many of these names, if I were to describe the geographical location, which we will in the next lecture, you see many things transpiring there today that you will read and hear in the news every day of events transpiring there, and many of them matching what was happening here, basically. We're not entering that promised land yet. Not going there. God has given us new lands, the house of Judah, the house of Israel, separate. And how precious it is. Verse 6, then did Moses, the servant of the Lord, and the children of Israel smite, and Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave it for a possession unto Reubenites and the Gadites, and to a half tribe of Manasseh. Well, which was that again? Well, we go through it. That's east of the Jordan. That's before they ever crossed over Jordan. That this land was taken, and it was given to Reuben, the Gadites, and a half of the tribe of Manasseh, where they settled their families there, and they would be the lead or shock troops that were leading the attack when they crossed Jordan, and their wives and children would remain on east of the Jordan, that is to say of the Gadites, Reuben, and half tribe of Manasseh. But they would go help their brothers take over their land, which is being described here. Our Father always has a perfect plan. You might see how Moses is brought back into this. This is who God gave the original orders. Joshua is following it through to the letter, as Moses had commanded. Moses, as we read in the last few verses of the book of Deuteronomy, last chapter, there will never be another prophet like Moses. Moses has not finished his work. Moses will still complete his work, the same as Elijah will. But here we have these records that keep us posted and keep us informed, that are very pertinent even to this day. Verse 7, and these are the kings of the country which Joshua and the children of Israel smote on this side Jordan, on the west. This is to cross over the Jordan all the way down to the tribe of Judah, the furthest to the south. And Baal-Gad in the valley of Lebanon, even into the Mount Halak, that goeth up to Seir, which Joshua gave unto the tribes of Israel for a possession according to their divisions, according to the 12 tribes, as they were divided among the land. It was conquered. It is too bad that we still have parts that remain at Gath, and Gath is way down south. Gath is very near off a ways from Gaza, and from the shoreline there where Nathan and his 4 virgin daughters taught during the New Testament time. All these things pertinent and important that we should hang on to. One more verse to go. Verse 8. In the mountains and in the valleys and in the plains and in the springs and in the wilderness and in the south country, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, where there were still many fallen ones and mixed hybrids, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. And of course the Jebusites would have been the one that founded Jebus, which would later become Jerusalem. And so it was. In the next lecture, we will skip from here to chapter 13 because it is just repetition, and I will take you to a map sometime during that lecture, the next one, laying this out whereby you can see for yourself the lay of the land and the home of the 12 tribes of Israel. All right, bless your heart. Old and stricken in years. And the Lord said unto him, Thou art old and stricken in years, and there remaineth yet very much land to be possessed. We've got to get it done. Verse 2, This is the land that yet remaineth, all the borders of the Philistines and all Jeshurun, that's to say the bridge there. Verse 3, from Sihor, the dark area, which is before Egypt, next to it, even unto the borders of Ekron, that's torn from the roots northward, which is counted to the Canaanite. That was their particular set of land. 5 lords of the Philistines, the Gazathites, the Ashdodites, the Eshkelonites, the Gittites, and the Ekronites, also the Avites. You got a bunch of mixture in there. Verse 4, from the south, all the land of the Canaanites, Meara, that is beside the Sidonians, and Aphek, to the border of the Amorites. So we have to clean all that out. Verse 5, and the land of the Gibeonites. Now here is where the Nethinim come from Gibeah. And unfortunately, this is where Joshua made his big mistake. They lied to him, and he promised them protection, but he sentenced them to a life of slavery. The unfortunate part is throughout the Old Testament, they served doing liturgical duties and finally took the clergy over in a large part because they were doing even the priest jobs by the time Ezra went to recapture Jerusalem. And all of Lebanon toward the sun rising, that's to the east, from Baalgad under Mount Hermon unto the entering into Hamath. Now, Hamath in Amos chapter 8, along about, about verse 14, this is where Israel would have a kind of, not a curse, but a very bad move when they would allow Hamath in. Why? Because it's the home of the Kenite. When you allow the Kenite to come in, you're in a heap of hurt. It means the people neither of the night, Arob is the way it's pronounced, neither of the night nor of the day. And so it is. When you allow them in, you have much trouble ahead of you. Verse 6,
So now I'm going to take you to Matthew chapter 4, verses 8, 9, and 10. And again the devil taketh him upon an exceedingly high mountain, and showeth him all the kingdoms of the world, and the glory of them, and said unto him, all these things will I give thee, if thou wilt fall down and worship me. Then Jesus said unto him, get thee hence, Satan, for it is written, thou shalt worship the Lord thy God, and him only shall thou serve. Then the devil leaveth him, and behold, angels came and ministered unto him. Okay, so this exceedingly high mountain, it doesn't say what mountain it was, but it could have been Mount Hermon. Just a guess and something to think about.
Departed immediately for Caesarea Philippi, which was located at the foot of the mountain. Caesarea Philippi was built around a sacred spring in the suburbs of the ancient Israelite center of Dan. Water from the spring feeds the Jordan River. This was Herod Philip's capital, located in a Gentile region far from the influence of Jerusalem temple politics. It was during a conference in the garden of a wealthy Greek convert in Caesarea Philippi that the apostles first acknowledged Jesus as the Son of God in response to his question, who say you that I am? From this point on, Jesus did not hesitate to fully and openly acknowledge his divine nature.
So now we're going to go into Matthew chapter 16, verse 13. When Jesus came into the coast of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, saying, who do men say that I, the Son of Man, am? And they said, some say that thou art John the Baptist, some Elijah, and other Jeremiah, or one of the prophets? He said unto them, But whom say ye that I am? And Simon Peter answered and said, Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. Then Jesus mentions the church and his death and resurrection. Then we go into chapter 17, and this is 6 days later. And after 6 days, Jesus, taken Peter, James, and John, his brother, and bringeth them up into a high mountain apart, and was transfigured before them. And his face did shine as the sun, and his remnants was white as the light. Now this high mountain could have been Mount Hermon, because Mount Hermon, below Mount Hermon is Caesarea Philippi. So they were gone for 6 days, and then came, and Jesus was transfigured on a high mountain, which we know that Moses and Elijah was up there talking with Jesus.
With Google Earth. When the 200 angels came down to earth, this is where they landed. This is Mount Hermon in southern Lebanon. Now, there's a guy by the name of David Flynn who's done some extraordinary research on this, and there's a picture of Mount Hermon today. If you go on Google Earth, you can put a marker there at that location. What's 1/3 of 100? 33.33%, right? That location is 33.33 degrees north by 33.33 degrees east from the Paris prime meridian, which used to be the true prime meridian before they changed it for political reasons. And if you go back and look at the history of the Paris prime meridian, it's also known as the Devil's Line for people who practice ley lines and the occult and all that kind of stuff. Now, David Flynn was the one that kind of picked this up, but you can go on Google Earth and check it for yourself. That's what I did. You'll see the location there if you can read that. The longitude is 35.54, but if you subtract the difference between the Greenwich, because that's from Greenwich, if you subtract the difference, you get 33.33 on the Paris. So that's the Paris prime meridian. There's something going on there. It's a very interesting conversation took place at the base of Mount Hermon, right here. Caesarea Philippi is where at the end of Jesus' ministry, he took his disciples and he says, "Who do men say that I am?" That was a strategic location because right there is the altar of the Greek god Pan. Pan was the Greek god of shepherds. So the good shepherd stood in front of the Greek god of shepherds and said, "Hey, who do people say that I am?" "Oh, some say Elijah, some say Jeremiah." No, Peter understood. Just off to the right of that location where Pan was is a foothill, and at the top of this foothill is the fortress of Nimrod. The first Antichrist who tried to create a one-world system without God. In fact, his desire was to kill God. If you're looking at the altar of Pan, Nimrod's fortress is to the right. To the left is this location right here, which is the gates of Hades. He was standing right next to the gates of Hades when he said, "The gates of Hades will not prevail." He was standing right next to it. You can go there today. I've always maintained Hades is not just a place, it's the brother of Zeus. 6 days later, Scripture says that Yeshua took Peter, James, and John to the top of a high mountain. Well, Mount Hermon is by far the highest mountain in the region. They're in the area anyway, so most scholars believe, as I do, that is the location of the Mountain of Transfiguration, where today there is a UN radar outpost sitting on top of it. Right across from a cross that people have set up as the location believed to be where the Mountain of Transfiguration took place. What's the UN doing with a UN radar outpost on top of the spot where the fallen angels landed? I understand the strategic location, Syria and all of that, I get it. But from that location, they can look right down into the valley to the very location where the 200 watchers came in the days of Noah, or the days of Jared, I should say, right? Pre-flood world. Genesis chapter 6.
Now, I have to interrupt here. I will leave a link to the full unedited video, but if you think about what he's saying, Genesis 6, I want to point out that in Genesis 6:11, it tells us the earth was corrupt before God and filled with violence. Now, that mention of violence is the first mention in the Bible. It's the Hebrew word H2555, and it literally is pronounced Hamas. So I just wanted to point that out and have you think about that a little bit, because it's pertinent to our current situation.
Yeshua could look down, and the UN can look down there today. Why did he bring his disciples there to ask that question? I could never understand that, because he gets so excited when Peter says, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And you read Yeshua's response, right? He gets so excited. I'm like, why is he so excited about that? When the day he was born, angels declared he was the Son of God, right? As he got older, everybody told him he was the Son of God. He picks Nathanael to be a disciple, and he says, "You are the Son of God." He says, "Why? Because I saw you under the fig tree?" You're going to see greater things than that. Every time the demons possessed people saw him, they threw themselves on the ground and cried out, "You are the Son of God." And he told them to be quiet. So from the day he was born and all through his life and all through his ministry, people told him he was the Son of God. So what's the big deal when Peter says it at the end of his ministry? His destination was Jerusalem. He takes a massive detour and goes all the way up to the top of Israel, to the base of Mount Hermon in southern Lebanon, northern Israel, parks in front of the Greek god of shepherds, says, "Who do men say that I am?" Some say Jeremiah, some say Elijah, some say one of the prophets. Oh, see, he understood the book of Enoch. That's clear. We saw that in the other scriptures, right? You are the Christ, the Son of the living God, not the son of Zeus. Oh, yeah, that's right, Peter. And upon this rock I'm going to build my church. Not these rocks behind me. That was an altar that looked very similar to Petra, like a city in the rock. It was a big embedded, place in the rock for Pan. It says that from that point on, after he left from that experience right there, it says he went preaching about his death, burial, and resurrection. And he headed straight from there to Jerusalem, where he would go 15 rounds with the devil, so to speak, and still be standing when it was over. That's why he took them to Caesarea Philippi. Because that location, remember the first prophecy in the Bible, the seed of Eve will crush the devil's head. So the attempt was made on Mount Hermon. So right before the big fight, Yeshua went to the very spot where that plan was hatched to try to prevent him from existing in the first place. He looked down and said, "Yeah, I got your number, Nimrod." Pan. I believe that this revelation is something we need to get for such a time as this. What did he say? "Upon this rock I'll build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overpower it." The gates of Hades. What's a gate? Something goes in and out of. Something's coming back through the gates of Hades. What's the fourth horse? The fourth horseman of the apocalypse. Pale horse, its rider is death. What follows him? Hades. What does that mean? That means Tartarus is going to be opened up in the last days. That is a description of the Nephilim army. It's the locusts that come out of the bottomless pit in Revelation chapter 9. And the description, they don't look like anything like people. The 200 million man army of Revelation are the 200 million locusts that are coming out of the gates of Hades. But if we understand this revelation, they will not overcome it. Us. But you got to understand it first. Right? You got to know what you're fighting. Right?